What's up, guys? Even though I don't know if I'm actually going to wind up having any actual plays on any of these games, I figured I'd talk about the Major League Baseball playoff scenario here, since it is the first day of the MLB playoffs, the wild card. And here, I believe these teams all had like a day off after their last game, so I don't know if the bullpen situations become that much of a factor, because they've at least had a little bit of rest because they didn't play any games yesterday. So there is that. So I think the starting pitching matchup kind of factors in a little bit more when that's the case than it otherwise would, versus how much the bullpen becomes a factor, at least with how like rested or how tired the bullpens are. I do think I have at least like opinions on all four of these games. You got the two afternoon games, Texas at Tampa. Texas is in a situation where they thought they were going to win the AL West right up until the very end. They were leading the division by a couple games, like really late, right up to the end, and they wound up with a tough final series matchup because they were facing a desperate Seattle Mariners team on the road, and Seattle was trying to get into that last wild card spot and actually failed to do so, even though they wound up, I believe, taking 3 out of 4 from Texas. Still not making it into the playoffs because Houston, on the other hand, swept Arizona. And Arizona was desperate to make one of those final wild cards as well, but they wound up getting in anyway. So at the very end of the Houston-Arizona series, I think Arizona knew that they were in and became like less desperate at that point, which kind of helped Houston in a way, because Houston actually wound up being the more motivated team at the end of that, because they were like, whoa, we can like take the division now. Not only are we going to get this last wild card, but we can actually move up. Texas let that slip right at the end, and they wound up falling into the wild card, and Houston took the division in the very last day, the very last games. Houston with the sweep and Texas losing 3 out of 4. That's a tough way to end the season, man. Texas, they didn't think they were going to be here. They thought they were going to be in the divisional round and get some days off, and now they fall into the wild card. I don't know what their mentality is going to be. They don't really want to be here. I don't know, and I don't think the pitching matchup is very good for them either. Montgomery is pitching for Texas, and he's been pretty good for Texas. He's a veteran, been around for a while, but his stats against Tampa lifetime are not good. They're in like a high 200s batting average against for Tampa's hitters, like in the 290s or something. That doesn't look good. And Tampa has Glasnow pitching. He's also like a veteran at this point. He's been around for quite a while. I don't know what his playoff experience really is at this point, but he's been around. And his stats against Texas, an OBA in the low 200s, like in the 210s. So I think it's an advantage to Tampa here. I don't know if I'm talking myself into a play on Tampa. The line has actually dropped a little bit. Like I see it at below minus 150. So I would lean Tampa because I don't know what the mentality is for Texas, the way they fell out of the division lead right at the last minute like that, whereas Tampa knew for a while that they were going to be in this wild card spot. So they had time to like mentally adjust and prepare. They just knew that's where they were going to be, and they have the better of the pitching matchup here. So I lean Tampa in that one. It looks like both AL games are actually the afternoon games today. So Toronto, Minnesota is the other one, and I actually lean Minnesota here. And it's Gausman against Lopez. I think Lopez is the better pitcher, even though Gausman has looked really good this year. I think Lopez actually has the better strikeout potential and the better stuff overall, and can like mow down hitters more than Gausman can, even though Gausman has been putting up quite good numbers. I lean slightly to Lopez there, and if you look at their stats against the opposing teams here, Lopez against Toronto and Gausman against Minnesota, they're both kind of in the mid-200s OBA lifetime, so it's kind of a wash there. And I think the feeling here is that Minnesota, they are in the worst division in baseball. They got into the playoffs, but they won the AL Central, which is a terrible division. So I think people are going to think, man, Minnesota might not belong here. I mean, you have teams like Seattle who had a better record than Minnesota, I believe, not making it into the playoffs, or Minnesota makes it in just because of the benefit of being in a terrible division with like the Royals in it and such. So I think the public is not really going to want to be on Minnesota here. And I'm looking at the market here. In the case of Tampa, by the way, Tampa does have the majority of the tickets and the money, it looks like, but more money than tickets. But in the case of Minnesota, it looks like the majority of tickets are on Toronto and the slight majority of the money as well on Toronto, but less money than tickets, which then, of course, tells me there's a discrepancy there and that some of the bigger bets have been on Minnesota here. And maybe they have the same thought that I do, that Minnesota's just being undervalued just because people don't think they're that good because they got lucky in being able to win a division that sucks. So those are my feelings on that. In the AL, I lean to Tampa and to Minnesota in these game ones. And then in the NL, you have Miami, Philly. And here I think there might be some value on Miami here because, and I lean that way, and this is a spot where Philly is the public team here as well. They have the majority of the tickets and quite a majority of the money as well, but less money than tickets. Again, kind of like in the case with Toronto. There is kind of a discrepancy there, and there's been reverse line movement, it looks like, where the line has gone down with Philly being the favorite. It's gone towards Miami against where the majority of tickets and money are. So that tells me there are some bigger bets coming in on Miami there. So that's the way I would lean, and it's mostly because I think they're being a bit undervalued in the market there because Philly had the better record. Philly had been ahead of Miami for like a majority of the remainder of the season. I think they wound up 6 games ahead of them or something. Philly had been locked into one of the wild card spots because the Braves were too far ahead of them, but Philly was further ahead of the other wild card spots. So they were kind of locked into that top wild card spot for quite a while. So people think Philly, is the better team here. I'm not entirely sure about that. They have Wheeler pitching, and he's been good. But Miami has Luzardo pitching, and I've always liked Luzardo. I think he's good. He's got good stuff. And his, I forget what their stats are against the opposing teams here. I think it's a bit of a wash, but I think Luzardo's are a little bit better against Philly, if I'm not mistaken. So I would lean that way, mostly because I think there's just value on the Miami side there because of the record discrepancy. And I think the pitching matchup kind of dictates that it's a much closer matchup there than the records would lead you to believe. And then in the final NL game, both of these are night games. I think you have the biggest of the favorites there on the board. Milwaukee Brewers against the Arizona Diamondbacks. This is the hardest one to predict. This would be the least, if I'm going to bet any of these, it's not going to be this one. I think if I rank these plays, I'll talk about the Brewers game first. I would slightly lean Diamondbacks, as ugly as it is, just because I think the Brewers are a bit overvalued, just because they're obviously the better team here, and they are the favorite. But the line has gone down a little bit, and we've seen reverse line movement in this one, too. So they've gone down from like minus 170 something into the minus 160s, despite having a majority of the tickets and a majority of the money, although, again, less money than tickets on this one as well. So some bets coming in on Arizona. I think maybe one of the factors here is that Fat is pitching for Arizona, and Milwaukee has essentially never faced him before. They've had one batter who I think has 1 at bat or 2 at bats against him before, and that's it. So that would give him an advantage like early against the opposing hitters because they haven't seen him before. But he doesn't have the experience, doesn't have this playoff experience, the experience playing in a game at this level yet. So that kind of pushes me away, and I think that kind of counters the advantage that he has having not been seen before by the opposing hitters. That, and he hasn't been that good this year. His stats have been pretty awful, actually, so I don't like any of that, whereas Milwaukee has Burns pitching, and he is their ace. He's been quite good, so that would take me off of like any of the benefit that I would think Arizona might have there. So if I rank these in like strength as far as the plays, I think I would actually say Tampa would actually probably be the top, then Minnesota, then Miami, and then Arizona. And those are my feelings on those games. Don't know I'm actually going to have money on any of those, but those are my opinions. I do have those opinions on all of them, those leans. Have fun watching the games. Peace.